Hello 141ers. Today we're going to talk about externalities and some solutions to the problem of externalities. So to begin, let's define what an externality is. So my definition for an externality is a cost or benefit to a third party. Okay? This concept of third party is a concept that you'll hear oftentimes. And a third party, a synonym for third party could be someone else. So not the buyer and not the seller, someone else. It's someone who isn't primary to the transaction or primary to the event that is taking place. So an externality is someone who is external, not someone who is internal to the process, event, or decision that we're talking about. Externalities can have four categories, or there are four types of externalities. So they can be separated first into production and consumption externalities. And for either, they can be positive or negative. So that gives us our four types of externalities. So number one, a positive production externality means that in some sort of production process, someone else benefits from that process. Or number two, there is a production process and there is a cost that someone else feels, a negative harm that a third party has. And then for consumption externalities, again, we have positive and negative. So let's go through each one of these four and think about an example that fits into each one of these categories. So let's start with consumption. I always think about economics from a consumption standpoint first. Maybe that's because I'm a good American and we're just good at consuming. We can consume. So a positive consumption externality could be related to your professor's appearance. So clothing and haircuts. Now, these are flippant and trivial, and the idea is that the externality probably isn't going to cause a big market failure, but there's still an externality nonetheless. So how can me getting more good, often and better haircuts and wearing better clothing, how can that have a positive externality? Well, I'm making a decision to get my haircut, to pay money, to buy clothing that looks good, that fits well, based on the cost to me and the benefit to me. I don't think about anybody else. But if you have to watch a video of someone who looks bad, who has bad hygiene, who has poor fitting clothing, and has bad breath to throw it in, that's going to harm, or it is kind of a bad thing to think about from a standpoint of me trying to transfer knowledge to you. If I'm wearing nice clothes, if I have a good haircut, if I seem professional, there's some positive benefit that you have because of me consuming. I don't think about you when I make those consumption decisions. Okay? The same thing could be said for gym memberships. You probably barely read that. When people use a gym membership, they get fit. Other people benefit from that because it lowers their healthcare costs. If all of the UNL employees had gym memberships and they used them, that's kind of important as well, they would have less obesity, less heart disease, less high blood pressure. Maybe they would have fewer colds, coughs. In fact, right now, our coronavirus, people that are healthy are doing better. There is a positive externality to those things. A negative consumption externality that I'm sure none of you can relate to because you're not 21 could be drinking alcohol. When you drink alcohol, it changes the way that you behave, and you don't think about how your behavior could affect someone else. My roommate, when I was a senior in college, when he drank too much, he first would tell you that he loved you, and then he would hug you, and then he would puke, in that order. When he told you he loved you, that wasn't so bad. When he gave you hugs, it was a little creepy, but not so bad. But when he puked in the sink and I had to clean it up, that was definitely a negative consumption externality that I had to deal with. Craig didn't think about, hey, I'm consuming too much alcohol and it's going to bother Tim. He only thought about himself. Okay? Production externalities can be positive and negative as well. A positive production externality sometimes can be described by the statement economic impact. So when Pinnacle Bank Arena opens in the Haymarket, the positive production externality is that all of the restaurants and shops in the Haymarket, they have increased foot traffic and increased business. Or a positive production externality could be something like the smell from Jimmy John's. Hey, they bake bread, it smells good, you don't have to pay for that. I always think about that because Jimmy John's has a sign on their door or on the entrance that says free smells are free. Okay. A negative production externality is pollution. We think about pollution often as being the one big externality that is to be considered. We have over here pollution as well. On Monday, we talked about this a little bit. You're driving a big truck, there's pollution. You're consuming gasoline, you're consuming use of a large vehicle, it creates emissions that pollute the environment. Pollution, remember, isn't necessarily just water pollution or air pollution. It could be sight pollution or noise pollution. Wind energy creates sight pollution to a lot of people. They don't like the look of them. So pollution oftentimes is the negative externality that we are considering. All right. The theoretical way to think about an externality is to think about our supply and demand analysis and thinking about how the third party would affect this equilibrium. So if we have a negative production externality, what we're looking at is the marginal benefit and the marginal cost of production, and realizing that there is some cost that someone else has. So this is kind of like, remember last week, or on Monday, I'm going to the cafeteria and eating, but someone else has a cost as well. And if we add that cost to supply, it's really just like saying S plus the externality. No matter what my level of output is, there is some difference between my internal cost and the total cost, which the difference is the external cost. So if this is our case, my initial equilibrium is wrong. It's not equilibrium. There's market failure at this point because at this equilibrium, the total cost is greater than the marginal benefit between Q star and Q1. So where the cost is greater than the benefit, we have that idea of deadweight loss. Surplus that goes to nobody. We are overproducing when there is this negative externality involved. The externality when there is a positive, the market failure when there's a positive externality is really the same thing. So here you are deciding how much you should exercise. You're saying, okay, I should exercise 1 time per week or 2 times per week, whatever that personal decision is to you. But what you're not doing is understanding that there is additional gain to someone else. No matter what level of exercise we're talking about, the value of that exercise has an external portion. And we'll just call this Q1 and Q2. If you were to exercise more, the marginal benefit is greater than the cost to you. We're missing out on this amount of surplus because you don't feel the externality. You don't feel the positive benefit that other people have. So the question is, how do you fix this? You can't say, Tim, get more haircuts, Tim, wear better clothes, exercise more, go to more college, whatever the case is, because it will make the world a better place. I mean, it would be nice to think about everyone addressing the fact that there are benefits to third parties, and you should continue to consume because there's benefits to other people. But that just wouldn't work. I really don't think it would. I mean, once in a while, maybe you think about positive benefit to other people, but usually you know who those other people are. I mean, right now you might be in a scenario in college where you're saying, gosh, I don't feel like I personally am receiving the benefit to warrant the cost of higher ed. But you might be thinking about a future spouse or future kids, and most likely those two, future spouse and future kids, they will benefit. If your job prospects are better, if your long-run earning potential is better, they will have positive impact because you're going to school. So even if you're saying, no, I do understand the benefit to a third party, that third party is probably within arm's length. You know who they are. If you don't know who the third party is, how do we get the market to move from Q1 to Q2? Well, in the case of higher ed, the way that we do that is we increase the supply curve. And an increase in the supply curve could come about by a lowering of the cost. So if we're lowering the cost of going to school, I can encourage you to increase your consumption of school by making you think that the cost is lower. That's called a subsidy. Likewise, if there is a negative externality, we can decrease the supply curve by adding a tax. So this would be S plus tax. That is hopefully equivalent to the amount of the externality. Okay? So a tax discourages the market, and a subsidy encourages the market. Right? So when I say discourages the market, it decreases the quantity. Encouraging the market is increasing the quantity. Another example of a subsidy that you might be aware of, we were just talking about health club memberships. Oftentimes big corporations will subsidize health club use. They understand that if they make the cost of joining the health club lower, more people become fit and healthy, overall, everyone benefits because of lower healthcare costs or lower health insurance premiums. So those are just a few examples of how taxes and subsidies can move forward or detract from a market to get closer to that equilibrium. Right. That's 15 minutes. That's good for today. So remember, we need to know what an externality is. It's a cost or benefit borne by a third party, someone who is external to the decision, external to the transaction, or external to the situation. There are 4 types of externalities. They can be divided into production and consumption, and then within each one of those 2, there's positive and negative. If we have an externality, the market has failed because our overall amount of surplus is not what it could be. The cost of consumption could be greater than the benefit, so we can eliminate that by taxes. Or if there's more benefit to be had, in the case of a positive externality, we can subsidize and hopefully move closer to a market equilibrium. Right, this will be on YouTube. I expect there to be questions. I will see you at 1 o'clock or 1:30. Thanks.